Good morning, everyone. Yasher Koyach to Paul Berger, who's for his maiden voyage. It's like in the House of Lords, you have to make your maiden speech, but here in the House of the Lord, you have to make your maiden davening. So, why is it that a person of ordinary sound mind doesn't forget their name? Why don't you forget the name of your telephone number? Why don't you forget the name of your bank? Why don't you forget your wife's name? Note the order I put all this in. Why don't you forget the name of your children? And the answer is because they're very important to you. So they are embedded in your mind. They're actually there, as if they are burnt into your memory, like hardwired in. So things which are very, very important are the things that a person tends to remember. And things which are less important, you relegate to some other part of your mind, and they kind of sometimes even disappear, and you're unable to recall them subsequently. Although, by the way, I believe that almost everything that we ever hear is retained somewhere in the mind, and there were some experiments which were done a number of years ago where a person touched a person, opened a person's brain, touched parts of the brain, and they had absolutely perfect recall of everything which had ever happened to them in their lives. So it's in there somewhere, but it's kind of lost. And this is what Rabbi Dostai ben Yana is saying in Mishnah 10 in the 3rd chapter of Pirkei Avot, that if a person forgets his learning, his chayav benafsho, and then he goes on to say, no, I'm not talking about a person, just forgets the learning. I'm talking about a person, opinions, until the person actually sets about to remove his studies from his heart. Now this can be in one of two ways. Either it is, he's talking here about a person who is just decided that they deliberately do not want to be engaged in Judaism any longer, and everything which they ever learned in Cheder, everything they learned about Judaism is no longer part of their life, and in that respect, in a sense, they've deliberately put it out of their lives. But I think he might be talking about something which is a little bit more subtle than that, because you don't often find those sorts of people. Here he's talking about ordinary people, the rest of us. What does it mean that you set about to remove your studies from your mind? Is that something you do intentionally? Is it something that you set about to do? No, the suggestion over here is that what happens is it becomes less important to you because your mind is taken up with other things. So because you engage in other things, and the decision you've taken is to spend your life thinking about other things. You never intended to remove this, but automatically, because the mind will always focus on those things which are important to you at that moment in time, these things will simply begin to slip away because they don't have a space in your mind any longer. And that is something which, of course, happens to all of us. And interesting, he says over here that chayav benafsho doesn't say chayav mita. But chayav benafsho, what does it mean to be, the way he puts it over here, he is depart from your order. Chayav, how does he translate chayav benafsho? You pay with your nefesh. What does that mean? I think it means that your own quality of life is going to be diminished. If you disconnect yourself from Eitz Chaim, is the tree of life that sustains you, and if you disconnect yourself from that, who's the one who's going to suffer? Your wife and your children? No, you're going to suffer because you've diminished something in your life. So therefore, he wants to say to us that you need to remain connected. And the way in which you remain connected is that it remains important to you. It's there with you all the time. You come back to it, you study it, it's embedded, it's part of your daily life that you're studying, that you're learning, that you're engaging, etc. And that's the way in which, of course, you're going to remember lots of things. If only one had a memory, you can remember everything you've ever learned. But he's not talking about specific things, I don't think. He's talking about in general terms that you try and make that effort to remain intellectually, mentally engaged by putting your learning somewhere in the list of priorities in your life, somewhere pretty close to the top. And then it sticks with you, then it's important. And if it's important, you remember it. It's as simple as that. Rabbi Chanai ben Kasher Merotz HaKadosh Baruch Hu Zak Yisrael Lefichach Hirba Lem Temitzah Shneimar Mech Vetzman Tzidko Yagil Tov Yadeh.